Men of Reddit. What are the struggles of dating a very rich girl? Story 1. This is probably gonna get buried, but I've always wanted to write it out. I was never sure how rich she was. I just knew her family had property in a couple places in the US and China. And this is also how I found out property in China is dumb expensive. When she went for the holidays, if she wanted to, say, stay in Shanghai and then go to Beijing later, she didn't have to look at hotels or Airbnb. She just had to make sure she grabbed the right set of keys. It was weird. She wasn't dripping with designer clothes and drove a fuel efficient compact, but just looking at where her family had apartments/houses, I can only imagine. She was a super sweet, down to earth girl. Biggest heart in the world. Very hardworking and acted like a child in a candy shop everywhere she went. I think the biggest strain came from when we would eat together. For me, money was tight, and the best way to stretch my college scholarship money was to cook meals in bulk. Before she met me, she ate out literally every single meal. At first, it took some adjusting and budgeting. Bless her heart, she understood and found compromises. She loved my cooking and would surprise me with groceries and then say I have to pay her back by cooking whatever she wanted. Every once in a while, she'd pick up the entirety of a bill that we were supposed to split, but she always found a way to make sure I didn't feel bad about it. I don't think she ever once bought me an expensive gift. Most things were either handmade or were very thoughtful. For example, shoes I was eyeing for months but couldn't afford. She noticed them on my computer browser. I miss that girl. I hope she's doing well. Story 2. Pretending to pull out your wallet when it's time to pay for anything, then asking, "Are you sure?" Story 3. I dated a pretty rich girl. Her dad was a prominent lawyer, her mom a successful artist, and her uncle a 1980s pop star. Honestly, they were great people to be around. They were old money and not snotty or overly pretentious. Yes, they had a big old house and drove quality, not overly flashy cars. Yes, they had whatever they wanted, but not at all in a look at me kind of way. I, on the other hand, was dirt poor. I mean, the early 90s grudge was a blessing for me because I looked like that already. But her parents didn't care and were always very welcoming. Her mom even took me to my first punk show. I guess it's true when they say cash screams and wealth whispers. Hey, that sounds like an awesome family, man. I'm so glad for you. Story 4. I dated a senator's daughter in high school. Everything was about keeping up appearances, and we had to be careful where we went in public and stuff like that. Her parents offered me to get nicer clothes to wear when we went to dinner in public, but I felt weird about it. Relationship didn't last long. I'm not good at being political. Oof, tough luck bringing politics into a relationship there. Story 5. Keeping up with her. She wanted to go to the European trips, expensive vacations, expensive restaurants, etc. She made very good money, and I was limited in my funds and had to spread it out. I couldn't just fly to the Caribbean at the drop of a hat, so in turn, she left me for a guy who could. Edit. Wow, that took off. I wasn't expecting to hear from so many people. Thank you all. The thing is, I have money, a great career, etc. We did it for 2+ years and had a great time while we were together and did a lot of stuff. As a matter of fact, she was probably the best girlfriend I ever had, but the underlying thing was that no matter what I did, I always felt this feeling of not being enough. She doubled my salary, if not a little more, in the 6 figures. In the end, she admitted to wishing I had more financial freedom and that it bothered her. It hurt like hell to hear something so personally insulting from someone I loved. So, she found someone who was in her tax bracket, so to speak. Yikes, that must have stung. Story 6. I dated a girl from a wealthy family when I was in college and I was very poor. The most frustrating thing for me was that our definition of a crisis was so different. From month to month, I would literally not know whether I could afford my rent or be able to put gas in my car, and she would be freaking out about some, to me, minor social issue or whether a store carried a fashion brand she liked. It definitely made things difficult, and I had to remember that it's your perspective that dictates what is a crisis and what isn't. It was honestly a lesson I've tried to remember over the years. Story 7. If you're from a very poor family, as was my case, expect a lot of butting of heads when it comes to financial issues. I was raised very poor. Now I make a decent amount of money, but if I'm ever in a situation where I have a lot of expenses and may run into financial issues, I tend to panic a little bit and plan my spendings extremely carefully. My wife came from a wealthy family, and she never had to deal with financial struggles at this point in her life, and she doesn't quite care about spending a lot of money. Basically, she doesn't think past the fact that we can afford something. She doesn't think about possibly needing money in the future, and that's where we always butt heads. In short, make sure you ask her to let you know before she spends more than X amount. That was the solution we came up with, and it actually saved us from a lot of financial trouble. Spending should be a thing you both agree on, otherwise, it's not going to work out. Hey, that's smart. It's a good tip. Thank you for that. Story 8. I'm married to one. Nothing to do with my wife at all. She's a gem. It's my mother in law's expectation and image that are always at the center of just about every single decision. Father in law, the real rich version, is cool as hell though. Hey, that's not so bad. At least there's one half that's good. Story 9. I dated a girl in college that came from a very wealthy family. Texas oil money. Like, she flew from Dallas to Florida, where we went to school, in her daddy's business jet. That kind of rich. I think the biggest thing for me was how out of touch she was with everyday money issues. For example, someone smashed into my car in the parking lot and I was totally upset about it. She was like, "It's okay, you can just get a new one." She had no concept of how insurance or deductibles work, and she didn't understand that I could not simply go out and get it fixed right away. Another example was that she wanted me to go to Miami to see a U2 concert with her. She had like front row tickets. I couldn't go because I had work. She didn't understand that my boss would not give a crap about how cool it would be to see U2. This was before they sucked. Aw, you missed U2 because of work. Yikes. Story 10. She was always doing something, constantly going on trips or to the opening of expensive restaurants or traveling to her parents' vacation house or getting tickets for some opening night or something. It was frankly exhausting. She had money and she wanted to spend it, and I just couldn't keep up. I say had because it was entirely her parents' money. She was in grad school, though she was struggling at it, and otherwise had absolutely no work or experience. Outside of a restaurant, she barely had any life experience either. That girl sounds lame as heck. Story 11. Admitting financial struggles. When my wife and I were dating in university, her family invited me up to their cottage during the break between Christmas and New Year's to ski, skate, and otherwise play in the snow. I wanted to go, but I didn't know how to ski and had no outdoor clothing appropriate to be out in the snow. No ski jacket, pants, or boots. I declined the invitation, but my then girlfriend was really sad and asked why. I had to admit I didn't have the gear needed and I couldn't afford them. She then passed it on to her family, and when I visited them on Christmas Day, they led me to a room with 3 types of everything new, with tags laid out on a bed for me to choose from. It was a wonderful gesture, but I had mixed feelings. I appreciated the gear very much, but I felt like a charity case. Also, managing expectations of my wife for travel and expectations with children's activities. She was used to jetting away whenever they felt like it and had her own horses growing up. That's just not an option for us. We do okay and we're happy, but horses are not financially viable. What do you mean horses are not financially viable? They're perfectly fine. Just look at them. Story 12. I lived in a pretty rich area of the Bay Area. My girlfriend at the time was very rich for this already wealthy area, but she truly had no concept of money. Her budget was $12,000 a month. Her family brought her a brand new Porsche because her car was 5-year-old BMW M5. It was honestly like dating an alien. Any issues I had in everyday life were just so far out of her life experience. Edit. She had a trust fund that paid out $12,000 a month. Edit 2. If I had $10 for every person asking me if she is still single and if they could have her number, I would have a trust fund of my own that pays out $12,000 a month. Story 13. Let me tell you a story that I think will provide a nice contrast to the majority of the comments here. This story isn't mine, but that of a close friend's brother. So, Joe went away to college and met Sarah there halfway through freshman year. They were on again, off again for a few months before deciding to date seriously in junior year. They met each other's families on vacation or they would come visit their kids at school. By all accounts, Sarah's family was polite and nice and relatively laid back. Not a whiff of arrogance or anything like that. Fast forward to the end of senior year. Joe's paternal grandfather is on his deathbed and Joe desperately wants to go say goodbye. However, they go to school in a small town with a private airport. Think Cessnas. And the closest major airport is several hours away by car, and neither of them have a car. Said airport also didn't have a direct flight, so it would have been pushing 24 hours until he got to the hospice center to see his grandfather. This was destroying Joe, as he and Grandpa were very close and he was essentially a second father to him. Without a word, Sarah pulled Joe into a cab and took him to the airport. Waiting for them was Sarah's family's private plane. Joe, and my friend and her family, were all astounded. They had no idea Sarah's family was wealthy, and especially not private plane wealthy. Anyways, off Joe went and he said goodbye and he flew coach back to school. Sarah never said a word about it one way or the other, and neither did Joe. They are now married and both doing well in their careers, and from what I can tell, live a very normal life. But every once in a while, they disappear off to some remote island or jungle or mountain for a few days a year and don't tell anyone but their family where they're going. Story 14. Everything was about the family's image. Everything. Didn't last long. Story 15. Nothing. There was literally nothing wrong with dating a rich girl when I was poor back in college. I had a good major, was an athlete, and her family loved me. I didn't have money to give her flashy gifts, and she didn't care. If she wanted a Birkin, she'd just shop with her mom. I didn't have money to take her on fancy vacations or trips. We'd just go skiing at her parents' condo, and I could always find a way to scrape up some money to get myself there, and everything else would be taken care of. They didn't care that I wasn't an appropriate suitor at the time. I was just a college kid, and I must have done a nice enough job of presenting myself that they knew I'd figure it out. It was an awesome relationship, one of the least stressful relationships imaginable. We eventually fell out of love for some other reasons, but I look back at that time fondly and we ended things amicably, still on good terms with the family too. Story 16. The feeling that you'll always be living on the coattails of the family rather than making your own way in the world. Story 17. She had no self-realization of our financial differences and how it means that experiences in our lives are drastically different. She lives in Texas and would fly up to NYC for the weekend, go to Hawaii, California, or Florida on a whim. When she asked me what I wanted, I was always really meager because that's how I live. I don't need the most expensive item, but for her, that was all or nothing. Eventually, she learned to respect and almost envy my way of living. She enjoyed my simple life. But then it turned out she was a total sociopath, so she may not be the best example of dating a rich girl either. When people weren't gifting her things, she would just use her daddy's black credit card to get it. She was a very selfish woman.